Welcome one and all to the Hammer Territory podcast presented to you by Fox One. It is a pleasure to be with you once again. We are in the midst of the division series. We've already got the Toronto Blue Jays moving on. Scott Coleman to the ALCS. 3 final spots to be decided. So plenty of action going on the baseball diamond. But when you're a team that's not there, it's time to get into the offseason. And that's exactly what we're looking to do in tonight's episode. And Scott, law firm episode, Coleman and Coleman, the best Coleman combination when it comes to covering the Braves and baseball. Always a pleasure to do these with you, sir.
You as well, Sean. Always a pleasure to get the law firm together. And on the show, we're going to talk about pitching targets and pitching options for the Braves. And that's exciting. Like, this gets to be the exciting part of the offseason. A lot of opportunities for the Braves to get better. Let's hope they're willing to spend the money, maybe to give up a couple of prospects to really pour some fuel on this fire. Because as we've seen, this team, really the shortcoming has been a lack of pitching and a lack of healthy pitching in recent years, especially come playoff time. And let's hope they make some additions this offseason so they can kind of get this team back to where we want them to be.
Yeah, and to set the stage a little bit, we're going to give kind of a general overlay. We're going to kind of, give a general idea of why exactly pitching should be the focus this offseason and also the names that are out there. I just, give a little bit of a spoiler. I believe the reason why I'm a bit more confident this offseason than in past off seasons, the Braves are going to get that arm that they've been seeking for, multiple seasons now, is that they just are going to have more options to choose from this year. And that's always a good thing for Alex Anthopoulos. But Scott, let's get right into it. Why pitching? And the reason I say that is because when you look at this team over the past 2 years, yes, they have underperformed. But I think that anyone who has followed or covered this team closely, they would tell you the aspect of this team that probably was close to being contending level was the starting pitching when they were healthy. That old saying that sometimes the best ability is availability, it has never rang more true than with the Atlanta Braves over the past couple of years. It's injuries. And also just in general, you just have more room to add value to make this team better through the pitching side because so many of our position players are locked in place long term. It's the injuries that we've got good quality. It's the injuries that have occurred, but it's just the flexibility to add value. I think that's why Alex Anthopoulos is focused on pitching once again.
Yeah. It makes sense, Sean, because assuming this team can figure out shortstop, whether it's Ha-Seong Kim or somebody else, the offense is pretty set. Now, I think they're going to add an outfielder of some kind, but that can maybe be a conversation for another day. But shortstop, outfield, the lineup is basically set. The big question is pitching, and you can never, ever, ever have too much pitching. We have said it before on the show. We're going to say it a million more times. It's going to be a theme of the offseason. Whenever you feel like you have enough pitching, go out and add another starter or add another bullpen arm because God knows you're going to have injuries. You're going to have underperformance. And I think for the Braves, and we talked about this on our show over the weekend, but if everything goes well, I think you can feel really good about the depth and talent this team is going to have in 2026. But that's just not a gamble that we or anybody should be willing to take because more than likely somebody is going to get hurt or somebody's. Of course, we just watched the entire Braves opening day rotation hit the 60-day injured list at some point, plus Spencer Strider's injury. I mean, it's just you can never account for the unknown curveballs that are being thrown your way over the course of a baseball season. Hopefully the Braves go out and add a reliable arm to this rotation.
Absolutely. And when you think to yourself, you're like, okay, well, they've added so much pitching over the past few years already. Why is it a need all of a sudden again? I mean, I get injuries, but you also have to think to yourself, Max Fried is a member of the New York Yankees. Charlie Morton is going into retirement. Unfortunately, Ian Anderson and a few other promising prospects, they did not work out over the years. So that depth that the Braves, while they're building it back up, the depth that the Braves had a couple of years ago, it just unfortunately did not work out. That happens across baseball when it comes to pitching. But this should come as no surprise because this is the track record of Alex Anthopoulos. You go back a couple of off seasons ago, he was looking to add Aaron Nola from the Phillies. Nola eventually went back to the Phillies for $25 million per year. Same setup with Nathan Eovaldi last offseason. We were tied to him early in the offseason. Went back to the Rangers for $25 million a year. Alex Anthopoulos, I feel, has the type of arm that he wants to add to this rotation, and I do think that he's willing to spin, but I think that also plays a part in this, along with the fact that he's mentioned pitching multiple times as being the priority over the past few weeks.
Yeah, Alex said as much in his end-of-year press conference that starting pitching and adding a starter is a priority. Now, we're going to see what exactly happens over the next 6 months, but I think you bring up a good point. Aaron Nola, the Braves are reportedly in. Now, I don't know if they were in for 7 years like the Phillies ultimately gave, but it makes you think that this team, for the right pitcher, is willing to pay 20, 25 million plus dollars a year to add a really good starter to this rotation. Nathan Eovaldi was terrific. We also heard through some sourcing that the Braves actually felt pretty good about adding Nick Pivetta last offseason until the San Diego Padres came in with a creative deal with a player opt-out and some escalators. It didn't work out, but it does give you the feeling, at least here as we sit in the second week of October, that the Braves and Anthopoulos really do want to add somebody to this rotation, because then let's say they add one of the dozen or so names we're going to talk about tonight with a healthy Chris Sale, with a healthy Spencer Schwallenbach, hopefully with a healthy and improved Spencer Strider, Waldrop's around, Lopez, Holmes, AJ Smith-Shawver. Like it's not hard to dream on having one of the very best rotations in the game if you're able to add somebody to help stabilize and bring some depth.
Absolutely. And let's not forget that, we talk about injuries, we talk about these arms that we want to add. Yes, the injuries that, when we say injuries, you're thinking of the, injuries that kept this team out for multiple months. But even when they were thriving in the regular season in 22 and 23, it was the fact that you had injuries pop up right at playoff time. Alex Anthopoulos, I'm sure, is tired of having quality starting pitching options, but he can't use them when it matters most, or he can't reliably use them when it matters most. I know that's just part of the game, but when it happens consistently, things need to change, obviously. And the reason why we want to get into this immediately when the offseason starts, Scott, is I think that it is no small factor that this year there just seems to be more options available, especially in free agency. There are a few teams out there that clearly could be trade partners for the Braves. It feels like that after missing the past 2 seasons, despite getting Chris Sale, missing the past 2 seasons on some targets he was going after, but with more options potentially this offseason than in past off seasons, this could be the time when Alex Anthopoulos lands that arm he badly wants.
And it looks like on paper, this is going to be a pretty healthy and robust free agent pitching class. Just some of the names. You have Framber Valdez, you have Ranger Suarez, you have Dylan Cease, you have Michael King, Zach Gallen, Shane Bieber, Merrill Kelly, Chris Bassett, and a handful of other veterans. Now, obviously, there's a range there. It's not breaking any ground here that someone like Framber Valdez or Dylan Cease is a lot better than Chris Bassett. But I think what we're saying is there's kind of a wide range, and that's probably helpful when you're trying to be efficient with money and get the most value as possible, that you're not locked into like 3 options and everybody else is just total dust. There's a nice range of pitchers here, some veterans, guys with a lot of durability, which feels like it's going to be a talking point and really a point of emphasis for the Braves. You can always bank or try to bank on reliability and durability in a rotation. You need that guy to go out there and pitch every 5 days. And sure, it's fun as hell to dream on someone with a lot of potential, but maybe can't stay healthy or hasn't figured it all out. But I think when I just list off all those names as potential free agents, the continuing theme is a lot of them have a long track record of being successful and being durable in the majors. And I would sure think that's something the front office is going to want.
Absolutely. In other words, the Braves are going to have plenty of options to pick from. But before we get into some of those names, we want to talk about some options that you can pick from. And that is exactly what we want to talk about when it comes to the DraftKings Pick6 app. It's our weekly segment where we look into a specific player, some specific names that could make you some money due to their performance. And Scott, with baseball playoffs here, I think that there are plenty of names that you can look at, but there's one right now that sticks out among the rest. And he's been absolutely outstanding. Of course, we're talking about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I would venture to say there may not be a better hitter in baseball right now, and he proved that by beating the best hitter in baseball in Aaron Judge.
That's right. And hey, we are an Atlanta Braves podcast. And I have to think, Sean, that many people listening to this show or watching this show didn't exactly shed a tear last night when the New York Yankees were eliminated from the playoffs. The Blue Jays are such a fun story, and Vlad Jr. just absolutely terrorized them, hit above 500 in the series. his OPS against the New York Yankees in the ALDS was above 1,600. That's pretty good. Yeah, it's like a good week for Ronald Acuna Jr. when he's on one of those heaters. It was a lot of fun. I know I'm rooting for the Blue Jays. Honestly, the American League is Blue Jays and then either the Tigers or the Mariners. I mean, if you made that bet 6 months ago, you'd be a wealthy man. Maybe you can check out DraftKings, do something like that. But yeah, this was an all-time performance from Vlad Jr. And I mean, I find myself kind of rooting for the Blue Jays, especially with the Braves out of the picture.
Yeah, and especially with, some of the Blue Jays themselves having missed out on some big names here recently, they finally got that long-term extension with Vlad Jr. I don't know if he could have reciprocated in a better way than leading them to the ALCS. But while he's having plenty of success, you can have plenty of success picking him among others. Download the DraftKings Pick6 app right now and use code FOUL. That's code FOUL. New customers play $5 and get $50 in bonus picks instantly. Ride the upside where a few bucks can turn into a bag only on DraftKings Pick6. The crown is yours.
Football is back, and so is your shot at big wins. With DraftKings Pick6, the official daily fantasy partner of the NFL, your game day instincts can score you real money fast. Here's the play. Just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats, or breakout rookies to elite QBs, and unlock the upside that every snap brings. The better your calls, the bigger your payout. And here's the kickoff bonus. New DraftKings customers get $50 in bonus picks with just a $5 entry on your first pick set. This season, play your player instincts. Download DraftKings Pick6 app right now and use code FOUL. That's code FOUL. Play just $5, get $50 in Pick6 bonus picks. Make the call, ride the upside in partnership with DraftKings Pick6. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick6 bonus picks that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
Again, we want to welcome you to the Hammer Territory podcast presented by Fox One, the Fox One app, talking off-season pitching targets. And Scott, we kind of in the first segment, we got setting the stage out of the way. Now let's get into the details as to who could star on that stage this offseason as potentially the newest member of the Atlanta Braves. And I think one thing first to kind of look at as we get into some of the free agent names is why it may make sense to go the free agency route rather than the trade route. And Scott, to me, it's options. And also it's the fact that it's simply money that you'll be spending. When you look at, we'll get into some trade targets a little bit later in the show, but you're a bit more limited because of the amount of teams that, you have a few teams out there that can make sense, but there are just so many good starting pitching options that are out there. So many healthy starting pitching options that are out there. That's why I think going the free agent route probably makes sense for the Braves.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's funny, Sean, before we started recording, you and I kind of put our heads together and we're trying to come up with what baseball teams this offseason are going to clearly be selling. And I don't even know if clearly is fair, like might be selling is more fair to say. And not only selling, but have pitchers who would be like a marked improvement for the Braves. Like, sure, the Colorado Rockies are probably going to be selling, but do you really want any Rockies starting pitchers? Probably not. But, I mean, the Minnesota Twins might sell off. They do have some nice pieces. The St. Louis Cardinals have some nice pieces. They might sell. But a lot of teams, especially with the expanded playoffs, are not going to sell. Like we've seen teams like look at the Toronto Blue Jays. They had 78 wins as a projected win total coming into the year, and they're 4 wins away from the World Series. It feels like with the expanded playoffs, you're going to see fewer and fewer teams just clearly selling with absolutely no prayer. And a lot of the teams that have no prayer don't have much to sell anyway. So it does feel like if I was a betting man, you can never count out Alex Anthopoulos from getting really creative with the deal and maybe adding somebody that nobody expected. But free agency does feel like more likely of an avenue for him to add somebody.
So that's somebody that we're talking about. Again, we're going to go through a list of names, and we're not necessarily going to narrow it down in this episode. I think there's a couple of favorites Scott has and that I have, but I do think that it's important to kind of establish those boxes that you're looking to check when it comes to adding a specific starting pitcher. And I go off of, the fact of him adding Charlie Morton in the past, which is such a successful ad, trading for Chris Sale, looking to add a Narinola, looking to add a Nathan Eovaldi or a Nick Pivetta. I believe that he wants a veteran, someone that has an established track record of being able to consistently offer good production, probably more often than not middle of the rotation guy, but could step up to be a frontline guy. He wants durability. So many of these starting pitching options that we're going to talk about, they have several years under their belt of 150 plus innings. Yes, we're in the era of where 150 is the new 200, 225, but that makes a big difference. So someone that is durable and playoff exposure. I think that's the third box that probably is not talked about enough. A veteran starter who has shown that he has the ability to perform well when it matters most in the playoffs. Now, maybe not as many options will check that box, but I think those are the three boxes that Alex is really looking to check with an addition this offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. And, before people go, well, he never spends money. Alex is a cheapskate. Ownership is a cheapskate. I mean, you can make that argument after last offseason, but this team did reset the luxury tax, which is not a small thing. I know the Braves claim it wasn't part of their equation. I think that's a bunch of baloney, but that's, that's probably something we will never have a definitive answer on. But, I think too, with all of these starting pitchers on the free agent market, the beauty of a free market is that you kind of let the other teams set the market for you. And sure, do I necessarily think that Framber Valdez is a likely option for the Braves, who's been very good with the Houston Astros for years? No, not really. But if everybody's kind of thinking Valdez is going to get 6 years, $150 million, I don't think the Braves are going to give him that deal. But maybe the market doesn't develop that way. And Valdez ultimately settles for a shorter term deal. Maybe it's 2-year deal, a team option, whatever it is. I would like to think that Alex is going to be creative and open to flexibility in order to add the best pitcher possible at a reasonable contract. Because frankly, bargains in free agency are virtually impossible to find.
And the other thing about, looking to add a veteran starter who has been in the league for 8-10 plus years is that these pitchers, these level of pitchers, they know how positive of a opinion many have about the Braves organization. I think that stands out. And many of these pitchers probably, especially with, the free agent market being saturated, that $15 to $22 million range where Alex usually likes to settle on a significant ad, that probably will work out for one of these pitchers. So that's why I feel like that this is the year where he will get that significant arm. But without further ado, Scott, let's get into some of these names. There's plenty to cover. We're going to have many, many more shows getting further into why these names make sense, but let's set the stage a bit more with some names that could make sense.
So I'm going to come out and just start with my clear favorite, and that's Dylan Cease. I have wanted Dylan Cease to be a member of the Braves for a long time. 30 years old, has spent the last couple of seasons with the San Diego Padres. And let's get it out of the way. Dylan Cease is a Scott Boras client, so that could be an obstacle, although let's hope that Alex Anthopoulos is able to work with Scott Boras, who also represents Ha-Seong Kim, and maybe those two will kind of get the good juices flowing, get Ha-Seong Kim signed to either a 1-year deal or a multiple-year deal with the Braves, and then move on to Dylan Cease. I think Dylan Cease has the clearest path of all the free agents to being like a legitimate number one starter if everything goes right. He throws very hard. His fastball averaged 97 miles an hour last year, and he throws a ridiculous slider that goes 89 miles an hour, Sean. Now, Cease is not perfect. He did see an uptick in his walks and his home runs last season, and on the surface, his ERA ballooned to 4.55, which doesn't exactly scream superb starting pitcher, but all of Cease's underlying metrics were more in his career norms. He had a 3.5 FIP, xFIP, expected ERA. He gets a ton of strikeouts, a legitimate guy you can hand the ball to in a playoff scenario and say, Dylan, go strike out 10 of those dudes, and he has the chance to do it. And the fact that he did not have a great season on a results basis might work in the Braves' advantage. Cease is also from Georgia. He's from Milton, Georgia, which might be a factor in where he wants to pitch. So for all those reasons, I mean, if you tell me the Braves are going to sign Dylan Cease to any kind of a contract this offseason, I will be ecstatic on this podcast.
And I believe if you go back to we got Jared Kelenic on a Sunday night. I believe it was the opening Sunday night of the 2023 winter meetings, if I'm correct. And I believe it was later revealed during that weekend that Alex Anthopoulos, I think, kind of hinted at it, or somebody may have said it. The Braves, I think, reportedly may have been close to getting Dylan Cease in a trade from the White Sox over that weekend. Again, I'm not wanting to say that with full confidence, but I think that there has been some, kind of conversations with that. But so there's been past.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, sorry to cut you off. There was also the reported interest at the end of the offseason last year. You'll remember we got a rumor that both Dylan Cease and spoiler, Michael King, who we're also going to talk about here in a little bit, were reportedly of interest for the Braves. I mean, it makes sense, man. They're both really good pitchers. And just one other quick note on Dylan Cease. We talked about reliability and durability. Over the last 5 seasons, going back to 2021, so the season the Braves won the World Series, Dylan Cease leads all of baseball with 162 starts. And not only does he lead baseball in 162 starts, he leads everybody by at least 4 starts. So this dude is the epitome of take the ball every 5 days and go. Of course, any pitcher can get hurt. All it takes is one pitch and you're in trouble. But in terms of durability and reliability, Cease is about as clean of a bill of health as you're going to find.
Absolutely. And so, Scott talked about his favorite, and I'll be honest with you, if we could get Dylan Cease, I would be absolutely ecstatic as well. Personally, I think that Cease may be someone who may be a little bit out of the price range for the Braves, but you know what? Alex Anthopoulos may be to the point to where he's my guy. I'm going to go get him. A name that I like, and I've always liked, and Scott, I know that you were familiar with him as well, Zach Gallen. Zach Gallen, formerly of the Arizona Diamondbacks, who became a free agent this year. It was the most inopportune time for him to have the worst year of his career as an established major league starter. But I am a huge fan of his. And I feel like that if he had the season that he had, perhaps he's someone that maybe, could come on a shorter term, higher AAV type deal to kind of get himself right and go back into the free agent market. Or he may just be okay to settle for a long period of time with a winning team like the Braves. But the 2 biggest reasons why I am a fan of Zach Gallen is because he's durable, as we've discussed. 4 out of the past 5 years, at least 148 innings, I believe 184 or more in 3 of the past 5 years. But another big thing, 3 top 10 Cy Young finishes. This guy would be the perfect example of someone who can pitch like a number 2 starter, but step up to be there as the number 1 starter when you need that. And if you had a Zach Gallen with Spencer Swellenbach, Spencer Strider, Chris Sale, you've legitimately got 4 number 1 and number 2 starters filling out your rotation to where if one of them is not available in the playoffs, you still have as strong a rotation as anybody. So he's the type of guy who I really think could fit into that price range. And with his track record, I think he'll age well. Also, he's only 30. He's number 1 guy on my list in terms of maybe this, if a Cease is too expensive, a Zach Gallen could really make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, Zach Gallen was, frankly, pretty bad in the first half of the season, but he was much better in the second half. And, he's not somebody who overpowers you on the mound. Like, he's good command when he's on. His fastball sits around 93, 94, which you can obviously work with. But, not a Cease who can throw 98, 99. I think about that start. He was humming 100 against the Braves a couple of years ago. But Gallen, he's a veteran. I do think you'd be buying low a little bit, which is always, it's the old buy low, sell high. I think you'd have an opportunity to buy on a clearly talented guy. Maybe Gallen doesn't have like legitimate number 1 Cy Young potential anymore, but I think you made a good point that if you do get mostly healthy years out of Sale, Schwallenbach, and Strider, if Zach Gallen is your number 4 or even number 3, if one of those guys does go down, I think you're going to be more than okay with it.
Absolutely. And that's the whole point is that, I think with the Braves, one of the biggest things that they're looking for is which of these starting pitching options can we rely on the most? Who can we gain the most certainty with? And I want to make it clear, I will take Dylan Cease over Zach Gallen any day of the week. And the reason why is because of the Braves' ability to maximize on pitching talent, but I also put a lot of value in certainty. I know he had a bit of a struggle in the first half this year. I just think with Zach Gallen, there comes a lot of certainty, but a lot of good quality as well. But Scott, we're just getting into a few of these names. Let's hear a few more that really stick out to you from this free agent class that you feel could move their way to the top of the Braves wish list.
So I mentioned his name a moment ago, but Michael King does have a mutual option with the Padres, although everybody expects him to become a free agent. And if folks need to remember Michael King, he started game 1 of the wild card round against the Braves last year. I mean, he just shoved it down their throats. I mean, it was as dominant of a pitching performance as I have seen. Michael King, when he's healthy, is really good. And that's the key point here. So this past year, Michael King had a pinched nerve in his right throwing shoulder and ended up missing 3 months. Funny enough, I think he did it the night before he was set to face the Braves, and King was scratched like 2 hours before. And everyone was kind of downplaying it. And then he went on the IL and then he missed 3 months. So a nerve issue in your shoulder is not a super common problem for pitchers. We'll see how he checks out medically. And then when he tried to come back, he also then developed some knee inflammation that King said was a product of him trying to come back too fast as the Padres were in the playoff chase. So Michael King is not going to get a mega contract, I don't think, because he's coming off a year where I think he only made 7 or 8 starts, but he was fantastic in 2024 and kind of like a Gallen. They're not a perfect one-for-one comparison, but you are buying low a little bit, and clearly Michael King still has top of the rotation upside. And then another name who I thought was maybe possible for the Braves this time a year ago is Shane Bieber. Once upon a time, Bieber was one of the very best pitchers in baseball. He underwent Tommy John surgery in April of 2024, so he's about 16 months removed from that now. And after missing the early parts of this past year, he was actually traded to Toronto and had a solid 3.57 ERA in 7 starts. As you can imagine, Bieber did not look terrific and did not look like his old self, but this is going to be a bet on a talented guy who, again, you're probably not going to have to go 5 years and $100 million on Shane Bieber. It'd be very Anthopoulos-like to go out and buy a guy who maybe isn't at his peak value with some room for growth and ability to get back to where he was just a few years ago.
Absolutely. And you know, those names, you know, also with those names, it's, you know, Shane Bieber, you know, you go back to 2020, 2021, he was thought of as being perhaps the most, you know, he at that time was thought to be an even more, had better potential than like a Tark Skubal or someone along those lines. He was thought to be the it pitcher a few years back.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, injuries have reared their ugly head, as we more than know, but I think that he would potentially be a good add. A couple of other names that I definitely think could make sense. And I bring these names up because of familiarity and reported past interest. But we know that Alex Anthopoulos, he's had past interest in, current Phillies pitchers. You know, I believe that he was interested in Zach Wheeler before he went to the Phillies. He obviously was interested in Aaron Nola. Another Phillies pitcher will be a free agent this year, and he's a name we know all too well, Ranger Suarez. If you can't beat him, join them or have them join you is the best way to describe it. But with Ranger Suarez, again, not an overpowering guy. I definitely think that is important to establish, but someone that's just got a consistent track record of knowing how to get guys out, and also someone that has extensive quality work in the postseason. I think he's definitely someone that's durable. He's still young to where you can get good years out of him. I think that he would be an excellent potential addition for the Braves. And then when it comes to recent reported interest, if you go back to the 24 trade deadline, Zach Eflin, who at the time was with the Tampa Bay Rays, the Braves had reported interest with him multiple times throughout the 24 season. He eventually went to the Orioles last year, had a bit of injury issues that he was working through, but he's someone who potentially could, not necessarily cost that much in terms of money if he wants a make right deal. He's only 31 himself, but if the Braves have had interest in him, I think he's the kind of arm that Alex Anthopoulos looks at and is like, okay, I know he hasn't had just an awesome career so far, but he's the type of guy who I think Alex likes to work with, that they can get more out of than he previously had shown. So he, based off reported interest in the past, is another name that could be an under the radar type of addition.
Yep. Yeah, it's an interesting call. And Eflin actually, I think, underwent back surgery a couple of months ago. And I mean, this past year was completely lost. I would be interested in adding Zach Eflin if he's like the second guy they sign. If they go out and sign a better, more established arm, and then Eflin's willing to take like a 1-year bounce back. Absolutely, dude. Like, he could be your fifth starter. He could be a bullpen arm. Like, you can find ways, because as of even 2 years ago, Eflin was really good. And you said the Braves were reportedly interested. And hey, if Ranger Suarez is interested in Atlanta and the money is right, that dude just absolutely kills the Braves. It is infuriating to watch because he's just dropping like 90-mile-an-hour sinkers on the outer half. And apparently nobody can hit it because he just works 7 scoreless against the Braves seemingly every time he goes out there. Not a power pitcher. As he gets older, I think he's someone who's probably going to age pretty well because he doesn't rely on 98 to be effective. But not a power guy, kind of unconventional in the modern game. But I'm fascinated to see what kind of contract Ranger Suarez gets, and if the Phillies kind of let him leave. I know he's going to be a free agent, but I would sure think he'd be interested in coming back to Philly. We'll see. Maybe the Phillies just kind of overpay to make sure he comes back.
Absolutely. And, it could be interesting, because they've certainly got a powerful starting rotation coming back themselves. You can kind of call the Aaron Nola, contract a bit of an overpay, at least to this point in it. But the point is he's definitely going to be an interesting one to watch. But in general, I think it's pretty clear there's a hierarchy of free agent options this year. You certainly would love the Braves to add at the higher part of that hierarchy, but if they have to settle down, and that may be Alex's game, letting a quality starting pitcher who for some reason has kind of fallen through the cracks, that's when Alex can pounce to really get that valuable contract. So it may be that he waits a little bit before he adds a type of free agent guy, but as we've named, plenty of options to look at. But we also know Alex Anthopoulos loves to make the noteworthy trade. He has made a career of doing it. And so we're going to talk about some more names who potentially could be on the trade market this offseason for the Braves after another word from our partners. Welcome back to the Hammer Territory podcast presented by Fox One. And so, Scott, we just talked about some free agent options, some options that could make sense on the free agent market. Again, they just cost money, so that's why they may make the most sense. But Alex Anthopoulos, he's added Chris Sale before through trades. He's added David Price back in his days with the Toronto Blue Jays through trades. He's someone that knows how to work the trade market, not only effectively, but creatively. And so he could go this route once again. And the thing that stands out to me is that this is the type of move where if the free agent market just winds up being too costly, you could see Alex pounce on the right deal quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think as we talked about earlier, it's always hard to find good starting pitching that's available for anything less than like a complete king's ransom, because teams don't want to give it up because starting pitching is so hard to find. But I do think there's probably a couple of teams who are going to have arms available who the Braves could make a deal with. The farm system is a little bit deeper than it's been in recent years, which is only going to help trying to get a deal done. And if the Braves have envisions of maybe adding a high dollar closer or maybe a multiple relievers or adding an impact outfield bat, it might make sense to try to trade for a veteran arm instead of sign one to somebody who either has team control that's cheaper or even just maybe can get that team to throw in some money to help cover the cost next year.
Absolutely. Again, being creative. It's worked out. It hasn't worked out. It worked out with Chris Sale. Did not work out with Jared Kelenic. But at the end of the day, if the right player is out there, that could certainly be a route that Alex can go. So let's identify that right player. But first, we need to identify where that right player is currently playing. What teams could make sense for the Braves to potentially contact? Again, this is why I think free agency may make more sense than the trade market, because there's a limited number of teams out there, but that doesn't mean that there are clear trade partners. That, Scott, Alex Anthopoulos has had a history of talking with in the past as well.
Yeah. I think one team that really stands out is the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, I think we all thought the Cardinals might be ready to sell and burn it down a year ago, and they really didn't do much of anything in the offseason. So Sonny Gray is a name I'm going to bring up for probably the 9th year in a row on this podcast. Sonny Gray is now 35 years old, and he makes a lot of money. So that's probably the biggest hurdle here. St. Louis would have to cover some of the money. Because they front-loaded his 3-year contract, Sonny Gray makes $35 million next season, Sean. Well, that's light money in the days of Sean Coleman. But for Sonny Gray, that's a lot of cash. And so you would imagine St. Louis would have to cover some of that. We'll see what they want to do. But Sonny Gray, if the Cardinals are willing to cover some of the salary, was very good again this past season. He had a FIP, an XFIP in the low threes, had a stellar 26.7% strikeout rate and only a 5% walk rate, which is really impressive. He does not walk people. And once again, the theme of this podcast, Sonny Gray, very durable. He has made 23 or more starts every year since 2014, other than the COVID year. And over the past 5 years, Sonny Gray has averaged upwards of 28 starts a year. That is the epitome of taking the ball every 5th day. He's going to be 36. He may not be a true number one at this point. But again, kind of what we were saying earlier, if you could add someone like Sonny Gray and some money to this rotation, along with Sale and Schwellenbach, Strider, Waldrop, that's really, really good.
Braves have been linked to him in the past. He very much would be a kind of a 5 years later version of Charlie Morton. That loosely similar repertoire, same portion of their careers. You think with the Braves he probably could stay effective later on in his career, similar to Sale, where you get him with 1 year left on his contract. But if he excels here, he probably would want to stay. So it would make sense. And for the Cardinals, with that price tag, he may not cost that much if the Braves would be willing to take on a good portion of that contract. So I definitely think that he stands out as a potential option. But other names that maybe get people a little bit more excited are, out there as well. Some teams that I think could make sense for the Braves to potentially go and just explore. You've got the Minnesota Twins. You've got the Miami Marlins. Both of those teams are kind of in limbo right now and or looking to rebuild. And you also have the Texas Rangers, who we know potentially are looking to cut financial costs this year as well. And so, Scott, those are just some teams that make sense. I'll get to names in a few moments, but first, want to get your thought. Any other teams and a few other names on the trade market that could make sense beyond Sonny Gray for you?
Oh, man, it's tough. I mean, just looking around, let's do a really quick. Blue Jays not selling. Yankees, no. Red Sox, no. Maybe the Tampa Bay Rays, but I don't know if they really have much. The Orioles are probably trying to contend still. Cleveland's not going to sell. The Tigers are not going to sell. Royals aren't. The Twins, who we talked about. The White Sox are obviously in a rebuild, but they don't have a lot to offer, even if they wanted to sell. Looking at the American League West, the Angels are probably potential sellers, but again, these teams, these bad teams, do not have much in the way of good, controllable starting pitching who they would want to trade. Or if they do have good pitchers, they might be really young and cheap. They want to keep them around because maybe they feel like they can contend in a couple of years. And then in the National League, which was really flat this year, Phillies, Mets, you're not working to deal with them. Maybe the Marlins, like you said. The Nationals don't really have much to sell. I mean, maybe like Mackenzie Gore could become available. Might be an interesting name for the Braves. Again, in the Central, we talked about the Cardinals, the Pirates. I mean, unless they want to make Paul Skeens available, I don't necessarily see a fit there. And then in the West, I think you have 4 teams that want to contend, and then the Rockies are just an absolute wasteland. So it's hard, man. I wish there were 12 teams, or it's wow, these are obvious sellers. Maybe I'm looking at the Pirates, maybe Mitch Keller could be a possibility. But again, at least to me, second week of October, I feel like they're more likely to go through free agency.
Absolutely. Now, there are a few names that have been connected out there. One popular name that was out there at the trade deadline that I think many teams are going to be inquiring on is Joe Ryan of the Twins, who's just been pretty straightforward. Again, he's not necessarily stuff-wise, but just in terms of track record-wise, resume-wise, very much like a Zach Gallen before Gallen struggled this year. Just is simply one of the top, 10, 15 guys over the past 2 or 3 years in the American League. Controllable, I think, for a few more years. He could be an option, but maybe not so much because I think many teams are going to be on him. His teammate, Pablo Lopez, who the Braves are familiar with from his days with the Miami Marlins, that is someone that you could potentially see the Braves kick the tires on, because we know the Braves have reportedly talked with the Twins since they had potential interest in Byron Buxton at the trade deadline. So that could be a name. The Texas Rangers, who I mentioned, may look to cut some financial costs. They have a lot of money tied into their starting rotation. Could Alex Anthopoulos pick up that phone and say, hey, we were interested in Nathan Eovaldi just a year ago. He had a bit of injury issues this year. 2 years, $50 million left on his contract. Could they work out a deal with him? That could be an option that makes sense as well. And we know that the Miami Marlins are not afraid to trade within their division. Jesus Luzardo went to the Phillies just last offseason. Sandy Alcantara, I know that he has struggled. I know he's come back from injury. I know he's not who he was in 2022. But if I'm correct, I believe 3 years, $30 million left on his contract. I think that still is a valuable contract that you may be able to get at a discount since he struggled a bit this year. That could be a name that could make sense as well. But to Scott's point, the same reason that we're interested in these names, so many other teams are going to be interested in these names as well, because many of those names that we mentioned are under control and could potentially come at a discount. So that, again, is another reason why the trade market may not make that much sense.
Yeah, I think the Braves will obviously call 29 baseball teams and say, hey, what are you thinking on this guy? Where do you value Joe Ryan? Where do you value Sandy Alcantara? And are you cool trading a guy who's been in your organization his entire career to the Braves just down the road? We'll see. But I do think it's encouraging. The Braves have a little more farm system depth. They have a good amount of pitching in the upper levels of the minors, and more of their position player talent is in the lower levels, but there's still some intriguing prospects down there. So sure, if you can make a trade, generally you're going to get better value by going through the trade market. You're not going to necessarily have to pay as high of a dollar cost to add in trades. But of course, then you are giving up prospects. The farm system's finally coming to life. Do you now want to cut all your prospect talent in half at this point? I don't know. You might also give up a draft pick this offseason in order to sign somebody who's good. That's another consideration. But, it's all a big calculation for Alex Anthopoulos, and hopefully he had someone good. I don't necessarily need Paul Skeens, but I need someone we can be excited about, honest to goodness excited about. Sean, we come on and do a pod and we're pumped up for the season now because they've added this player or that player. I really hope they kind of invest in what they need to invest in, which is a middle or frontline starter, add some firepower to the back end of the bullpen, and then add one bat to the lineup, probably in that outfield DH mold.
And you probably are looking at the bullpen, but just think about it this way. Why would Alex Anthopoulos potentially want to add more quality to what may currently be the most, filled with quality aspect of his team? Please go look at the rotations that have been pitching in the playoffs for some of these teams. Go look at some of these names that have been pitching. Now, to their credit, they pitched well. But imagine seeing some of those rotations and then seeing what the Braves have if you've got Chris Sale, Spencer Swellenbach, Spencer Strider, and one of these names that we mentioned added to the cause. That is so many arms that can go through an opposing playoff lineup multiple times. And I know, again, it's all about health. But the more that you have of those type of arms, if you were to lose one, you could pop another right back in there in a big situation. I think that's a big reason why Alex is wanting to add an arm. And to end with this, Scott, I feel like there should be a higher level of confidence he'll get that arm added. Now, if he does, I think that the big moves will hopefully be extending Ha-Seong Kim and getting this notable arm added. But if that is the two big moves of your offseason, I consider that a successful offseason.
Oh, me too. I mean, I really like the idea of Ha-Seong Kim. Let's get him extended, signed, opt in, whatever you have to do. and then add a frontline starter and then add a closer. And I would feel pretty good about this Braves team's chances. Now, of course, they'll add little pieces, depth, add someone to the bullpen who isn't maybe an A1 relief option. But yeah, it's an exciting spot, because if you can tell yourself the Braves are going to spend or give up the prospects required to add these positions of need, this could be a really good roster on paper. And sure, they have to go out and they have to perform. They can't have half the lineup having career worst first halves of the season like we just watched. You have to hope the injury fortune's a little better. But, let's go. Let's get back to the playoffs. It sucks not having the Braves in October. They've won. How many baseball games have they won since the World Series in the playoffs? 2? Right? They won 1 game in 22, 1 game in 23, none last year, none this year. We need to get back to being in the playoffs, making deep runs, and being a legitimate World Series contender. I think they have a real chance to do that this offseason.
Yep. Since they celebrated in Houston 2-10 in 12 playoff games between 22 and 24. And of course, the other, news today, we don't want to go without mentioning this, and I think it is notable. The Braves did part ways with longtime head of pitcher development in the organization, Paul Davis. Now, I think that it goes without saying his track record was quite successful in identifying talent. But again, we mentioned pitcher development. You have to feel that the amount of injuries that have stacked up, especially in some of our younger arms, probably played into that decision. The notable thing about this to me is that it means that, again, this organization is looking to change its course with how it does things. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say I know exactly what that means and the exact details of that. I feel confident in saying the Braves may not have those exact details as of yet, but they're making organizational changes at different levels. So that is notable as well. So when we go out and try to get this arm that potentially is going to be more durable than other arms that we've had in the past, add them to what hopefully will be better injury luck, you could be in a very good spot very quickly.
Yeah. Let's hope. I mean, good Lord, Sean, this team deserves some fortune on the injury side. I mean, the last couple of years have been rough. And then, of course, you had the injuries right before the playoffs too in recent years, which just really was a kick in the groin. And you mentioned Paul Davis, director of pitching development with the Braves since 2020, was let go. I don't know, maybe something behind the scenes, maybe just a difference in philosophies. That was an interesting report from Carlos Collazo of Baseball America. But the Braves, like you said, I mean, they're evaluating and making changes, and hopefully they're for the better.
That is what we're all focused on, that darn mute button. That is all we're focused on, is the fact that we're wanting to get things done for the better. And Scott, I couldn't have asked, hey, Steven, Brad on the same level, but I couldn't ask for a better group of guys to talk about this with all offseason than you, Brad and Steven. Obviously, make sure to stick with Hammer Territory, your number one source when it comes to covering the Braves. Again, presented by Fox One, of course, part of the Foul Territory family of podcasts by Hammer Territory, as well as Foul Territory across all forms of social media. Myself at Stats SAC on Twitter, Scott at Scott Coleman 55. Listen, we're going to get into some of these names, dive deeper into them, along with some offensive players all off season to do that, but make sure you stick with us because we're going to have you covered no matter what. Until next time, for Scott Coleman, Sean Coleman here, go Braves. We'll talk to you again soon here on the Hammer Territory podcast.